What's the one thing as a dungeon master you need to avoid doing? No, I'm not talking about trying not to kill your player characters or TPK in the party. That will happen, trust me. Whether it's bad decisions or bad dice rolls, a player character death or a TPK is going to happen at some point in your campaign. What I'm talking about is railroading. A dungeon master should never railroad their players. What's railroading? That's when the dungeon master takes away the player's agency. That's when the player's choices don't matter. The DM does what they want. And that's what today's DM tips video is all about. Let's talk about how to avoid railroading and some of the differences between railroading, open sandbox, and linear storytelling. Let's start with a few definitions. What do I mean by open sandbox? An open sandbox game is one where the players can do anything. And I do mean anything. Yes, you may throw out some quests and adventures for them to eventually get to, but they can just go and do whatever they want and you're adjusting on the fly. I'm not going to talk too much about open sandbox in this video solely because as a new DM, it's not recommended at all that you run an open sandbox world. It is going to be hard for you to adjust on the fly, and you're not going to have the experience yet to let your players run wild in an open sandbox world. The players can get up to some crazy shenanigans when you're running a linear story. So just imagine what they can get up to when anything is possible. What is linear storytelling? Linear storytelling is when event A leads to event B, which leads to event C. How does that apply to a game of D&D? Here's an example. The players are in town A. Goblins attack. The players chase the goblins back to the cave. In the cave, they find a note on the goblin leader, which mentions being paid by some baron to terrorize the town. So now they go to town to find out more about this baron. See, linear. At point A goes to point B, which goes to point C. Most published adventures are going to be linear storytelling. It's going to walk you through the story, plot point to plot point to plot point, so that you have a way to connect everything the players are doing. And that's one of the key things to think about in linear storytelling is everything leads to the next, which leads to the next. Also, in linear storytelling, the game may be on rails, which means it's a little bit more tightly controlled in terms of just how far off the rails the players can get, but it's still not railroading because the players' choices still matter. What is railroading? Railroading is when the DM takes away the player's agency. Like I said earlier, players' agency is the ability of the players to have their choices matter in what happens in the game. Also, and this is one thing I constantly struggle with and forget about, removing the player's agency is also when me as the DM tells a player what their character feels in a certain moment. The halfling family was just killed. When I told my paladin that she felt afraid and angry in that moment, it removed her agency. I should have asked her, how do you feel with the halfling family at your feet? And let her tell me how she felt, not me telling her how she felt. And that's where it can get tricky. It can be a very fine line sometimes in railroading. Not everything is as obvious as, oh, we want to go through the back door. Oh, I'm sorry, there is no back door. You have to go through the front. That's an obvious case of railroading. But sometimes it's the subtle railroads that you don't even think about, and those are hard ones to prevent. But there are certain things you can do to prevent railroading, and that's what we're going to talk about after we hear from Advertiser Rich and this week's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Only Crits. Do you love sharp-edged dice? What about dice with things inside of them like ducks? What about metal dice, both solid and hollow? How about mystery bags of dice? I know I can't resist those mystery bags of dice at my friendly local game store. I just always have to buy one when I pop in. What about dice trays and dice cases? Well, Only Crits has you dice goblins and dice dragons taken care of. They have everything you can ever want when it comes to dice, and each one of us can always use more dice in our lives. So, click the link in the description to go to Only Crits to let them know the Laughing Tavern sent you, and enter the code MIZOCRITS at checkout for 10% off your order. Thanks to Only Crits for sponsoring this video. Thank you as always, Advertising Rich, and thank you, Only Crits. A little special thing here, Only Crits is pairing up with Pack Tactics for a new Kickstarter coming out in November. So tune back here later for a preview of that cool Kickstarter. Okay, so you know you don't want to railroad your players, but how do you avoid it? One of the easiest things you can do is ask the players, how do you feel? What do you want to do? This way you let them tell you and you build a story based on that. This way you're not telling them, you do this, you feel that. So always ask them what and how and why they want to do something. Talk to somebody, let them tell you. The second is to let your encounters be fluid enough that they can be adjusted on the fly, or you reward the players for great decision making. Just because you created this cool encounter at the front of the castle doesn't mean a player shouldn't be rewarded if they're able to sneak in and bypass your encounters. I've had many encounters, especially of late, where my players did smart things and bypassed them. And I rewarded them by not having the characters follow, by not having them blocked. All right, cool. Well, I ripped up that encounter sheet and tossed it away because they made smart decisions. And good for them. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to figure out how to win, right? How to win. So let your encounters be fluid. And don't be so in love with something you've created that you're not willing to just let it go. Also, you can try to avoid the quantum ogre. Sometimes quantum ogres can be good. If you have a non-location specific encounter, say an ogre fight, you can move that to path B even though they took path A, right? Not a problem. You can move it around. Are they going to really know? It's a random encounter, right? But if you had something very specific, a specific location, don't quantum ogre it. If the players missed it, let them miss it. Don't just move it so that they can run into this cool thing you created. Use it later. Come back to it. Mention it. Maybe the players will come back. Oh, you see the castle on the hill. Well, we go to the left. Okay, well, that castle's always going to be there in your world now. Let it be there. That's probably the easiest thing to do, is not to be beholden to anything you create. Let the players tell the story. Let the players decide what happens, and then you react. Now, have I moved some stuff around? Have I quantum ogred some stuff? Have I had the goblin party that was up front that they bypassed hear the battle and then come running? Absolutely. That is still valid, because just because you snuck past the guards doesn't mean the guards aren't going to hear the combat and come running, right? So you can still have that cool encounter just somewhere else within the dungeon because now they hear it. So don't force them to go in just because you want that cool encounter. Let it happen and then adjust and bring it forward. Another great way to ensure you don't railroad your players is to not have plot information, plot points, key pieces of things locked into certain people, certain NPCs, certain places. This will allow you to plug and play that information based upon the player's decisions. Using an example before, when the players come into town, they want to go talk to the baker first. Maybe you just have that piece of information they were looking for be at the baker rather than the blacksmith. Now, would the blacksmith be the only one who would truly know in your world that piece of information? Then leave it there. But you have to give more clues to get the players to get over to the blacksmith eventually. But you're not forcing them to go there. That's where things like ticking clocks come into play, where, fine, you want to go talk to the baker, that's fine, but I've given you 3 hints that you need to talk to the blacksmith. And time's a ticking. That thief's going to be long gone before you find out where he is because you wanted to go talk to the baker and get some donuts. But you let the players go get the donuts, right? So don't lock stuff into certain things. And plug and play is great. The more you can leave your world plug and play, the better off you're going to be in not trying to force something into your players' throats. And that's where linear storytelling can help you. If you want to get players from point A to point B to point C, that's where you can start to leave clues that point to where you want them to go. Also, you can ask your players at the end of the session, what do you guys think you're going to do next session? Who do you think you're going to talk to? Are you going to want to go shopping? Ask your players. This way you can try to prepare stuff you know they're going to do rather than getting blindsided, and now you're trying to force them into what you had prepared. But if you ask them and they tell you, chances are they're going to want to go do that. Oh, you want to go to the baker and get some donuts because you just got into town and it's breakfast time? All right, cool. Now you can create a baker. You can create that NPC. Figure out if he's going to have any information for the players, right? If you don't know ahead of time, you're going to try and steer them. So the more prep work you can do in terms of talking with your players, preparing the session that they want to run, because really, once you start a campaign, it's the player story. You're just the narrator, right? I've said this many times on this channel. So ask. It will help you not railroad the players. And if you do kind of steer them a certain way, it's going to feel like it was their choice, not yours. But Rich, what do I do if my players are all the way over on the West Coast and the campaign and everything I have prepared is for stuff on the East Coast? Talk to your players. Let them know that you had a great time running and following where the story led. But you have a choice here. We can either go back to the East Coast and I can continue you guys on the story I already prepared, or give me a little while and let me figure out what to do for you guys over here. Or you can just very slowly, very subtly start to work the players back. Give them a clue that points back to that main NPC that they haven't heard a name of since session 3. Give another clue that mentions a town that's over on the East Coast with some magic item that one of the players absolutely desperately wants. There's ways you can get the players back over to where you want them, and then you can drop them right back in and run. I would suggest talking to your players, explain the situation, unless you have the experience and you want to take the time, because it's going to take a little bit of time to get them back over, right? You know, if you're 30 sessions in, it's going to take you 30 sessions to get back. Great, your campaign runs longer, but it will start to mess with leveling. It will, especially if you're doing milestone leveling. They've really gotten off the rails from milestone. So talk to your players. As with most things in Dungeons and Dragons, talking to your players is the best solution. One of the key things to remember, especially if you're a new DM, you are going to railroad somebody. You're going to remove the player's agency by telling them what they feel. You're going to force them to go into the front door of something. It's going to happen. Now, some of it can be by design, that you really didn't design any other way into this castle. I did it once, and it was intentional that way. It was a stronghold. It was a magical stronghold. So they sealed everything up. They had to go in through the front door. But sometimes you are just going to railroad your players. If you recognize it, talk to your players. Point it out. Hopefully nothing too bad happened because of it. Hopefully you didn't have a player death. Hopefully you didn't have a TPK. Hopefully something like that didn't happen. You may have to retcon some things, which is going back and rewriting what happened. You know, did they use magic items they would not have used if you didn't, railroad them? Maybe give them those items back. Maybe give them spell slots back. Maybe have that player wake up and it was all a dream. Now they're not dead. There are ways to fix it. Like I said earlier, talk to your players. If you know you railroaded them, say you're sorry. It's going to happen. especially as a new DM, you're not going to realize it. Like with me, with telling my players how their characters feel about something, that's the storyteller in me, that's the writer in me, it just comes out. And sometimes I can't help it. It's going to happen. Don't get down on yourself. If it's unintentional, roll with it. If it's intentional, if you're doing it on purpose, you may want to stop and consider whether you want to write a novel or be a dungeon master, because that is what it really comes down to. Dungeon masters that railroad their players have a story in their head, and they want to tell it, and they want to have it in a certain way. They want certain things to happen, certain story beats. That's being a writer. That's being a novelist. That's not being a game master. Game master is a narrator of the player's story. It is not the dungeon master's story. So once you start doing it on purpose to get what you want to have happen in the game you want, stop being a dungeon master. Please, just stop. You'll make everybody happy. Your players will be happy. And you can go sit down and write your book. If you like what I'm doing here, please, thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Like I said earlier, we got new things coming down on this channel all the time. So be sure to hit that bell too to stay notified. And as always, be nice to each other, accept each other, and just love each other.